Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Capital Gains Show. My name is Aaron, and this is my second video. I changed cameras for this video because I wasn't super excited about the quality of the camera I was using on my first video. I'm hoping that this one works out better. It's a lot more expensive, so we'll see how it goes. What I want to do is I want to talk about a tweet that I saw today that was really funny. It really, I think, succinctly a problem that socialists often bring up, which is related to occupancy of a home and ownership and landlordism. And someone tweeted this kind of, pro-socialist, shouldn't I own the apartment complex if I pay the landlord kind of thing? And then someone replied with a really snazzy response. So let's get right to it. I want to show this tweet and the reply to you. Here we go. Candace Mallet said, if my rent money is paying for my landlord's mortgage, shouldn't I be part owner? And then Hergitpa, if I'm pronouncing that right, replied, if my money is paying for my employees' mortgages, shouldn't I be part owner of their homes, right? And what that reply is doing is pointing out the absurd situations that can come up when a mandate is enforced that says anyone who uses anything or occupies anything has to be at least a part owner of it. Owning something shouldn't necessarily mean occupying or using it. And likewise, using or occupying something shouldn't necessarily mean owning it. It can, but it doesn't have to, or it shouldn't have to. Now, in capitalism, owning something that you use and occupy is optional, and not owning something that you use and occupy is optional, and owning something that you don't use and don't occupy is optional. And whether or not you rent out something that you own is optional. In socialism, it would be mandatory that you own something that you occupy or use, and it would be prohibited under penalty of gulag to own something that you don't use or occupy. Socialists call that absentee landlordism, when you're not personally using or occupying whatever it is that you own. So rent is banned, outside investment is banned, bank loans are banned. When you ask a socialist, well, what, I can't rent a car when I go on vacation, I can't rent a hotel when I go on vacation, that's when the socialist will say, oh no, those things are exempt from this rule. That the rule against absentee landlordism only applies to things that are being rented out for a long time. Short-term rentals are okay. Well, what they do when they say this is they're actually admitting that absentee landlordism is not a priori immoral. It's not wrong inherently. It's not evil by its inherent nature. They're just saying that they find it distasteful to rent something long-term or to be a long-term absentee, landlord. Another thing about this tweet that I want to talk about, she says, shouldn't I be part owner? Owning something, like I said before, it shouldn't mean that you have to use it. So if you want to own a hotel or own an apartment building, you buy shares or you buy the apartment building, you become an investor. If you want to occupy one of the units in there, well, then you pay the rent, you know what I mean? So you don't want to be in a situation where you have to own something in full. What if you buy a train ticket, you ride on a train? Do I have to be part owner of that train? What if I want to get a haircut? I go and pay the hair salon to cut my hair. Do I have to be part owner of that hair salon? No. Well, why would the case be any different for occupying a rental property? It shouldn't, and in capitalism it's not. But in socialism it is. It becomes absurd. So let me tell you something about public ownership of housing. It's allowed in capitalism. You can have a publicly owned or communally owned apartment building. That's fine, but it's not mandatory, and it shouldn't be mandatory. And I'll tell you what happens when you do have public ownership of housing. It usually tends to be of poorer quality. And let me give you an example. The worst landlord, and there's a lot of legitimate complaints about landlords in America, but the worst landlord in America is the New York City Housing Authority. Let me go back to the full screen here. The New York City Housing Authority is the biggest and worst slumlord in America. They've got the most dilapidated, terribly maintained buildings. They're unsafe. Kids that live in them get, exposed to high levels of lead in the paint. There's asbestos. You know what I mean? They're just the worst quality units available of any apartment, industry. And the thing is, the New York City Housing Authority is not privately owned. The landlord is the city, is the public. It's democratically controlled, and it's publicly financed. So you can't sit there and say like, oh, that you've got a precedent where publicly owned housing is better, because it's not. And let me give you another example. Cuba banned the buying and selling of homes. They banned absentee landlordism. They banned outside investment in property, and they said the homes all belong to the people. Now, Cuba is suffering from sanctions. I oppose the sanctions, by the way, but I'll tell you what Cuba does not have a shortage of. Cuba does not have a shortage of iron for rebar and steel beams. They don't have a shortage of quarries for rock and concrete, stone. They don't have a shortage. It's a very fertile land. They don't have a shortage of plants to make lumber and timber to build homes. They don't have a shortage of any of those building materials. What they have a shortage of is incentive. And as a result, Cuba, despite having a declining population, they're suffering a severe shortage of housing. They assign entire families to single rooms. Their shortage of housing is so bad. And the houses are all occupied. There are no abandoned properties in Cuba. Everything's occupied. But the properties look like they're abandoned because they're in such a state of disrepair. They're falling apart. They're in a much worse state of repair even than the New York City Housing Authorities is, because at least the NYCHA, they can rely on a little bit of capitalism to give them more money. They leech off of the capitalist economy, but Cuba doesn't have that advantage. So what you have in Cuba is you have the ceilings from apartment rooms falling on little children's heads and killing them. That's what's happening. And Havana, even the capital city Havana, is falling apart. It's totally dilapidated. The buildings are crumbling into dust. Cuba hasn't built barely any buildings since the revolution, and they have not kept up on maintenance of any of the buildings either. So the abolishing private ownership of housing or of anything, it leads to the total dilapidation and neglect and disrepair of that thing that you banned the private ownership of, that you banned the outside investment of. So you can sit there and talk theory and say, oh yeah, it'd be so much better if socialism were implemented and everyone had to own the housing that they live in, and there could be no absentee landlordism. But there is no precedent for that. What you have is all the precedents show the exact opposite. Every time everyone tries to implement that, it gets worse. It doesn't get better. So imagine a world where the absentee landlordism is banned and absentee ownership of housing is banned, and only the occupants of the housing are allowed to own it or even put up for development or for construction of it. Well, construction workers still need to get compensated. Architects still need to get compensated. So what are you going to do? Let's say you got a 10-unit apartment building, and each unit is going to cost $200,000 worth of construction material and architecture work in order to get built. Well, that means you've got a $2 million building, right? 200,000 times 10 equals 2 million. So you've got, say, 10 prospective tenants, 10 families. Now, they can't just put down a $500 security deposit and then pay, $1,000 a month or whatever it is. They'll each have to put down $200,000 up front, and they can't get a bank loan because that's absentee landlordism. That's outside investment. That's foreign ownership, from a non-occupant. The bank ain't going to occupy the apartment building, so the bank ain't allowed to throw down money on it, right? So you've got what you've got is a situation where it's going to be harder to make housing and to build new housing, and it's going to be harder for people of modest means to acquire that housing and to find their own place to live. That's why places where rent is so heavily restricted, you've got people in their 40s and 50s still living with their parents, or it's like Cuba, where you've got entire families assigned to a single dilapidated room, a room that was built in the 30s or the 40s before the revolution, and it hasn't had a new paint job since the 50s, maybe right after the revolution, right before they ran out of paint. That's the type of situation you're going to be in. That's the type of situation you're going to find yourself in when you ban those tools that capitalism uses to succeed in meeting the needs of consumers. Why have absentee landlordism? Why have rent? Why have mortgages? Why have bank loans? Why have investment? All of those things are tools. And what those tools do is they are used by capitalist economies to make housing and ownership of the means of production more accessible to more people, and especially people of modest means. It makes it more affordable, and it improves the quality of those things. You're not going to live in a complete total slum. You're going to live in something that has decent lighting and quality appliances and quality plumbing and a new carpet and decent paint on the walls, fresh paint on the walls. So when you remove all those tools, what you're doing is you're making it less accessible. You're making housing less accessible for people of modest means. You're making it, you're creating a big shortage of housing. You think there's a shortage of housing in the U.S.? There kind of is in some areas because it's so tightly controlled by the government. But let me tell you, the more tight you get the government fist on it, the more the shortage is. In America, the big urban areas that have the most affordable housing are the ones that have the most relaxed zoning laws, the lowest amount of restrictions and red tape on developers, and the most free market activity in terms of landlordism and property ownership, and there's the least amount of restrictions on it. So there's more types of connections and more types of trades that can happen. And what that does is that means that you're going to more easily and efficiently and more fully meet the needs and wants of consumers. And then when you restrict those tools, when you ban absentee landlordism and you ban outside investment and you ban mortgages and you ban bank loans and you ban profit, that takes away the tools that makes those things accessible to people, especially people of modest means. So what you end up with in a socialist housing market is you have severe shortages and you have more unmet wants of the consumers. So the consumer demand goes unfulfilled. And that's the difference right there. That's why capitalism is better than socialism.